say hi and give a very big hug and a brief hello. My name is Natalia Greene. I'm the director of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, and it's my real pleasure to know that people like you, Jesse, keep uh, allowing us to explore the rights of nature movement and allow this movement to keep growing with your wise words and your beautiful book. So I just wanted to make sure to thank you for not only this gift, but this tool that you're giving to the movement. I'm so excited that we're having the opportunity to receive this book and to talk about it with some amazing allies and people who are really fighting for the rights of nature around the world. And that this is being done in the framework of the book club of the Youth Hub, having the youth being such amazing leaders in this movement. So I just want to say that I am extremely excited to see that this dream that we dreamt about 17 years ago is happening in such an amazing and powerful way with the rights of nature movement, with cases, but especially with all the academic development. And your book is going to be a keystone, Jessica, in this movement. So thank you for this. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I just want to remind you that we will have one of our speakers, Janny, speaking in Spanish, and we have our interpreter ready so she can interpret and do the translation of Spanish to English. Everybody should be choosing the languages you speak. So if you speak English, choose the English channel. Para las personas que hablen español, por favor, tenemos interpretación. Escojan la versión de interpretación para español si solo hablan español. And I'm gonna leave you with the wise words of our friend Tosana so she can facilitate this space. Thank you, Tosana.
Thank you, Nati, for the lovely introduction, and I'm sorry for the delay. My name is Toos. I'm a social environmental systems researcher, rights of nature advocate, and climate activist. I've been with the Youth Hub for 3 years, and since 2021, the Youth Hub hosts a bi-monthly book club. In this space, we introduce youth and young professionals to the most important and impactful books and publication in the field of rights of nature, environmental law, theory, and philosophy. In a previous session, we discussed Is a River Alive by Robert McIlvaine, and today we are enriching this list with a very special virtual book launch of The Forest Fights Back with Jessica Den Oute. First, I will shortly introduce Jessica and her book, and then she will give us a presentation. Jessica Den Oute, born 1996, has an academic background in environmental law and has been involved in the international rights of nature movement since 2017. Den Oute shares her message globally and has spoken at the United Nations and Harvard University. In 2023, her acclaimed book, Rights of Nature, was published, in which she shares the inspiring citizen stories behind international rights of nature. In 2024, she founded the Rights of Nature Foundation, in which she further developed into a broad citizen movement in the Netherlands. Her expertise in the fields of rights of nature has been consulted worldwide, including in the Netherlands with 2 legislative proposals, Aruba with a constitutional amendment, and Ireland with a referendum. She has won several prizes and awards for her commitment to nature. Today we are celebrating the launch of The Forest Fights Back, a narrative-driven introduction to the rights of nature movement. Rather than only focusing on legal theory, the book weaves together grassroots struggles and citizen-led victories from Ecuador, Colombia, and Aotearoa, New Zealand, to Spain and the River Ouse campaign in England. The book deliberately highlights both the power and limitations of the rights of nature, making it an ideal text for this community. I will now share the presentation made by Jessica. One sec.
Well, I can take over those whilst you're setting up your screen. But thank you so much. Thank you. Actually, I have a whole list of people to thank, and I will do so. And hopefully, I won't forget anyone. But Nati, Toos, Josephine, Wendy, Mar, who's here, and Mika and Janny. It's a real pleasure to do this with you. And for everyone here, I'm really sorry about the delay as well. It's funny because, I feel like within the rights of nature movement, we're exchanging so much digitally. And ever since COVID, I would have thought, we sort of figured things out, but sometimes it takes a while. But really happy to be here with all of you. If we go to the next slide, you will see that I will, in terms of time as well, I will shorten my presentation a little bit on sort of the background of the book, the things I learned, because I really want to leave space for Janny and Mika it was really important to Toos, Josefina, and myself to have global speakers here as well to talk about their initiatives. So I don't want to take away from their time. And of course, if you have any questions for all of us, you can ask them later on. I think you introduce yourself. I include that for you. Well, thank you, Toos. You already introduced me, but I wanted to share a little bit more of the background on why I wrote this book. I have been a part of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature ever since I heard about the rights of nature, basically, which was 2017. I started off in the Youth Hub as well. So, I'm a really proud member of the GARN, really happy to do this with you. And I think one thing that really struck me about the rights of nature is I started reading all the big books that there are about the rights of nature by David Boyd and so many other authors who have written really good books about either sort of the philosophy behind this movement or the legal context. And coming from a legal background myself, I found myself mostly interested in sort of the legal constructs that were existent in countries like Ecuador with the constitution, all the way down to New Zealand with legal personhood. So I sort of dived into this topic coming from a legal background, but I quickly realized that, this is a movement that goes beyond law. What was so inspiring to me was to be able to talk to ecologists, field researchers, Indigenous peoples all around the world. And I think this sort of is really cool within the rights of nature, because I feel like most legal topics are quite sort of, legal in themselves. And this is a topic that invites us to ask questions and go beyond your own expertise as well. So when I read all those books, I realized that I read a lot about sort of the legal background on rights of nature, but I felt like some stories were missing, in the sense that I feel like the rights of nature movement is mostly powered by people worldwide, bottom-up citizens, starting from, concerned citizens that are fed up with local pollution, perhaps young people that inspire advocates to stand up for this movement. So I felt like the local people and their stories should really be highlighted, the real heroes behind the rights of nature. So I decided to write a book in Dutch first, my original language. I come from the Netherlands and it's called Rechten voor de Natuur, Rights for Nature. And in this book, I sort of try to combine a couple of worldwide global stories about the rights of nature. And by sharing those stories rather than the legal background, I felt like I could speak to a broader audience, rather than just a very targeted legal audience about the rights of nature. Because I believe that this is a topic that should be, accessible to everyone. So this book came out in 2023 and it's been translated and it's come out today in an English version. And we chose the title The Forest Fights Back. And yeah, I just wanted to give you this background because I think it's important to highlight that the rights of nature goes beyond just legal constructs, and it entails a lot of amazing people like the people here today in this Zoom that are really working on this on the ground. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to highlight one of the first reviews that I have gotten on this book, because I think it shows you something about the perception, I suppose, of rights of nature. And that is that this particular author of Publishers Weekly wrote that she thought that the rights of nature, in first instance, sounds like a pie in the sky. And what she meant by that is that, to some, this whole idea still sounds unbelievable at first. And I think this is the response generally we are getting from legal scholars as well, saying things like, our legal system isn't built to recognize the rights of nature. It's built to serve human interests. And it has found a way to promote economic interests more than nature's interests. So that is another reason why I believe that the rights of nature should sort of appeal and speak to a lot of people, because this goes beyond legal scholars, and is essentially in its base also a criticism on our current capitalist system as well, of extraction and everything that Janny and Mika will tell you about. If we go to the next slide. What I really liked about researching deeper into the roots and the stories of the rights of nature is that already Christopher Stone in 1972, one of the sort of the fundaments, one of the people that wrote the fundaments of the legal rights of nature, not necessarily the idea of rights of nature, because that has existed with a lot of indigenous peoples around the world for a long time. But he already compared this movement to the development of rights over time. Rights, in essence, were first established only for an elite group of society. Men who paid a certain amount of tax would get the right to vote. And over time, we have now recognized that rights are applicable to children, to women, to all human beings. And this is showing us that rights as a concept change over time because our norms and values shift as well. So if you place the whole rights of nature movement in the context of time, and with, for example, in my home country, the Netherlands, it took over 40 years for the women's rights to be recognized, then you will understand that we are on sort of a long-term mission. Sometimes I'd like to think that we are planting the seeds for tomorrow's generations. And that's why exchanges like these with GARN, for example, are so important. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to give you a short overview of the stories I collected whilst writing this book. So actually, it was quite difficult to write this book because the changes, the developments within all these different rights of nature cases happened so fast. I had to keep adjusting paragraphs, and there were new updates coming in all the time, which also shows the energy behind this movement. But I basically spoke to people in Northern America, Pennsylvania, Florida, all the way down to India, Ecuador, Spain, and in England as well. And I basically tried to combine those stories and tell those stories from their perspective, so that people, a broader audience, have sort of a first feel with the rights of nature and what it means to be an advocate for the rights of nature, like the people here today. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to share 3 key lessons that I will keep relatively short, so Mika and Janny can tell us more about their initiatives. But a few things I learned whilst writing this book was that, first of all, the rights of nature is a legal innovation, in the sense that I think a lot of lawyers and judges and other people with a legal background like myself will not have been told that nature can have rights. We have this traditional education, and we do not necessarily learn how to look beyond the law that is already there. And I think that is why education is so important, And knowledge in that sense is super important to be spread, because if we do not know, then people will not be able to change the system. And what I think I liked most learning, specifically in regards to Ecuador, is that I learned that the judges in the rights of nature cases, as time has moved on, so for the people here that do not know about Ecuador, Ecuador recognized the rights of nature in 2008 in the constitution. And ever since, there have been a couple of lawsuits, of cases where the rights of nature have been tried. And I learned that in the past few years, judges have specifically looked and referenced to different rights of nature around the world. And to me, this shows that even traditional judges or advocates who have not learned about the rights of nature in their education can innovate and can learn from each other. And I think in your own national initiatives, it is key to find policymakers, politicians, advocates, all sorts of people that are open to this new form of looking at the law and the loopholes it might provide for recognizing rights of nature or changing the whole system in itself. If we go to the next slide, that also touches upon the thing that I personally love most about the rights of nature movement, and that is the international exchange. For example, I know there are people here today calling in from Chile, I think from the UK. I myself am in the Netherlands, and I'm sure there's other countries present as well. And I think the rights of nature is really interesting in the sense that because it's such a young movement in terms of law, countries are looking at each other and are seeing what things work and what things do not work, and they decide to take that on. For example, in Spain, in Mar Menor, the first Western European country that have recognized the rights of nature for a heavily polluted saltwater lagoon, they have looked at things like access to judges, money issues. They have looked at all sorts of features in other countries that have worked or not worked for the rights of nature, and they took that on. So I think the international exchange is really important, even though you are working in different contexts. And personally, I would always stand for this exchange because, for example, coming from my country, the Netherlands, a Western European country with a very set mindset when it comes to nature, this old paradigm of rulership over nature, I think especially for those countries, it is really important to look beyond and see how other countries are treating and regarding nature in their laws. If we go to the next slide, I will finish off my sort of the lessons that I learned with a message of hope, because I loved speaking to students, local citizens, advocates. I spoke to all sorts of people online, and I asked them each and every time, how did you manage to get the law changed or the policy changed? And they would always reply that, it was never them alone. It was always them rallying up citizens nearby, setting up group projects with students. And I think the rights of nature is really built on a bottom-up movement, meaning that the more citizens stand behind the idea, the stronger the message is toward policymakers. And one of my favorite examples would be Spain, Mar Menor. Unfortunately, a huge ecological disaster had to happen in order for people to stand up to the regime and say, no longer will we watch and see how nature is being degraded within this current system. And it took almost 640,000 people to sign a petition for a new law that recognizes the rights of Mama Menor for it to be embedded in law. And even the opposition couldn't do anything about this, even though they have called this whole movement a new form of communism and all sorts of ugly names. They couldn't stop it because so many people stood behind the rights of nature. And people on the streets in Murcia, in different parts of Spain around the Mar Menor, said, I am the Mar Menor. And that is, to me, really is the beauty of this movement. I think coming to the next slide, I want to leave you with, this one of my favorite quotes that I think is highly applicable to the rights of nature by Margaret Mead about, how a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. And it's the only thing that ever has, and it's the thing that you can come back to when you lose hope, when you see what's happening in terms of politics, or it is really easy to lose hope. But I think as long as we stay together and raise our voices together, we can change the world. So, well, coming to the next slide, I shortened my presentation a little bit, but I really wanted to have more time for Mika and Janny. So this is basically the launch. Thank you for organizing this. If we don't get a chance to speak again, but thank you very much. And I'll leave it to Tosana to introduce the other speakers now.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I really love that you always end with a hopeful message. And I think what this book makes very clear is that the rights of nature is not only a legal strategy, but also a cultural shift and a confrontation with entrenched economic systems. So to deepen this conversation, we are joined by two practitioners whose work directly engages the tensions explored in the book, which are the limits of law, the realities of extractive economies, and the role of science and community evidence in defending nature rights. First, we have Janny Figueroa Ayala, who is a Chilean social worker and sociologist and the executive director of We Kimün, an organization working with indigenous and rural communities in the Biobío region of Chile. Her work focuses on environmental justice, territorial defense, and resistance to harmful infrastructure projects, including industrial forestry and hydroelectric developments. The Biobío case was heard as the 11th local session of the International Rights of Nature Tribunal in January 2024, examining the socio-ecological impacts of Chile's industrial forestry model and the devastating megafires of 2023. Janny, I don't know if you want to, if you want me to show the videos you shared.
See, I'll let you know if it's necessary. Well, they told me that I had a couple minutes, but I'll be mindful about time. Listening to Jessica, I did a shift in the order of what I wanted to state because I embrace this call for hope. And I feel that this obligates us also to rethink the way that we are pushing forward the resistance against that model that is so devastating to nature in our territories. As I was presented, I am Janny Figueroa. I live in the Biobío region in Chile. And at this moment, we are in a red alert in the region, and it expanded to other regions that are beside ours. And with multiple forest fires that are active and people that have been completely devastated in different territories. We make up an organization around 2020 where we have articulated different
organizations with different backgrounds, and we're all resisting the forestry model. After doing intensive analysis and research and gathering all of the different ways this affects the territories in the communities in Chile, we have showed with scientific evidence, with social evidence, and with every type of evidence, the impact that this model has. And sometimes, whenever we want to push forward the protection of nature, promoting awareness, environmental education, so that people can ingrain this new vision, this new paradigm of respect and having a different relationship with nature, we are imposed with this model that generates the consequences that we are going through today as a region and as a country. During this time, we have developed many actions in all of the fronts: environmental education, restoration, ecological restoration, fostering different possibilities and opening places for advocacy in order to be able to transform Chilean legislation that only favors an extractivist model that is destroying nature. In the year 2023, in January or February of 2023, we presented in our region, we had the forest fires that generated a socio-environmental disaster with a deep impact, not only psychologically, but also at a community level, and transcends economic and material losses, and that affects families and people and communities in many, many levels. At that point, during those fires in 2023, we were facing a catastrophic situation. And we generated different lines of action in order to be able to face what we were going through at that point in time, in terms of the forest fires themselves, but also trying to push forward the legislation that would allow us to protect our territories. Nevertheless, during that time, there were 326,000 hectares, and around 20 were burnt, and around 27 people died. And the surfaces that were burnt embarked 3 regions with 60% of monoculture that was burnt at that point. At that point, we thought that our resistance, our struggle would allow us to advance in terms of making decisions that would enable us to protect nature, that would allow us to educate our communities, that would allow us to raise our voices. Because those sectors that were most affected needed to do so. Nevertheless, up until now, Sunday, January 18th, they started, or new forest fires were started in our region that have us completely devastated. And there's been losses of complete villages and towns. Also, national parks that are being affected, forest protected areas. And it seems that we predicted what was going to happen in 2017, where we already had situations like this happening. Advancing in such a complex scenario in which we are living in today, where the season of high temperatures during the summer expose us during the whole season. And to these situations, we are going through something extremely complex. Our organization was able to articulate itself with other territories in order to organize aid to different communities, and it's not easy because there are places where there's such great loss. There's no power, there's no connectivity. It's really hard to keep a flow of coordination with people who are collaborating in the different fronts that are needed. And truthfully, the scenario is extremely complex. Our country is the one that has the forced extractivist model that is most devastating. Around 2 months ago, we've been organizing an international network where we have the participation of different countries, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, in order to look at what is happening with this model in the different territories. And we know that if today we don't configure a different scenario, it's really hard to move forward. Because while we try to keep on moving forward from advocacy, from different organizations, where we want a protected nature because we feel part of it or we feel as one with it. We have a scenario of an extractivist capitalist model that imposes certain regulations that only favor the big economic groups that are devastating our territories. What Jessica said at the end to me is substantial. And this this takes me to the different experiences, the different testimonies, this outlook that she gathered to the different spaces of participation that we are managing as well. Because I believe that I can't even fathom of thinking that facing this disaster that we are seeing right now, how we can advance in a model that is so violent, so aggressive, that does not listen to the citizens. It simply does not listen. So we have to design a strategy in order to be able to move forward. As she said, there's 600,000 people or more who can raise their voices to protect Mother Earth. And evidently, I believe that the focus should be transformed. I also want to let you know that alongside this resistance, this claim where we have visibilized a lot of data that are supported by different institutions and people who are part of the world, the scientific world. These claims also go hand in hand with having different protection actions for ecosystemic regeneration, of environmental care within the regions, because of a town that was completely burnt, they've struggled and they've been part of organizations not only to generate these claims against the model, but also having experiences that show that nature is alive, that it's a living being, that we have to protect it. El Keule is another species that we wanted to protect in the region. There are areas that also destroyed the protection that we were generating. But I've also listened to peers speaking about these testimonies, saying we have to move forward, we have to get up, get back up again. This is not lost. I know that in such an adverse context that we are going through in this minute in Chile, it's really hard to think about having a hopeful voice or a hopeful perspective, such as Jessica was saying. And nevertheless, I believe that there's another vision that is getting cooked in the oven that is not as visible. And we are generating networks or taking care of seeds, taking care of the water, regenerative experiences in different territories. And these voices, we also have to systematize them in order to be able to advance in the possibility of advocacy at a political level that might enable us to establish nature rights as rights that should be respected and valued in our country. We are running out of time. it might be disheartening to listen that everything is more complex, even with climate change. Communities have also recognized that climate change is not as relevant as the advocacy that the extractivist model is having with water and minerals and the different forest plantations. But we don't want to be pessimistic about this. We want to keep moving forward along these lines. We believe that we have a lot to do, even though we're living through difficult times. We're going to have to rise up from the ashes to keep on fighting. The voices of the people who want to help right now are important for us and to be able to keep walking this path. And that clearly was established by the Tribunal for the Nature's Rights that was celebrated in Chile in January 2024 with a verdict that establishes very clearly the responsibility of the forestry model in terms of the environmental destruction that we are going through right now. This is a model that does not only expand in our territory, but other territories as well. I want to leave it at that. There's a lot to say. If we have time, you can watch the video, but you can imagine that the social media is flooded with the information of what is going on precisely this very minute in our region and in many regions of our country as well. That is all. Thank you.
Yes, Jenny. Yes, we will also upload the videos with the recording of this webinar so people can have a look at it later. We will have some questions later, but first I want to introduce Mika Peck. Mika Peck is a professor of conservation ecology at the University of Sussex and the founder of Ecoforensic. He is a pioneer of paro-ecology, a method that trains local environmental defenders to collect rigorous ecological data that can be used as legal evidence in rights of nature cases. Ecoforensic has supported communities across Ecuador's cloud forests, the Páramo, and Amazon, contributing to landmark legal victories, including the revocation of mining licenses. I'll give the word over to you, Mika.
No, thank you very much. Just first of all, just to say, fantastic, Jessica. I think a very important thing that we have to do is spread the message of the concept of rights of nature and how real it is and its power. And every time I explain it effectively and succeed in explaining it, it gives an aha moment for people. It gives them hope. And I think this is the important thing to realize how powerful this concept is. And I think if you could share my slides, there's a couple of pictures there in the background that we had an artist to try and conceptualize. Has anyone got the slides from the Canva?
I don't have them ready right now, but I can also make you a co-host so you can share them directly.
I haven't got them because they're with you, I think. If you just, can you share them?
Let me check.
Just want to say that, this work involves having a really transdisciplinary team. This is a very academic phrase, but it means it's like many disciplines have to contribute, many levels of expertise. And one of the things I'm realizing is, first of all, how stupid I am, because I've got one level of expertise, call me a professor. It means I don't know anything about anything else. And the more I talk with other disciplines and across disciplines, the more excited I get about the ideas and the parallel concepts that can merge to create an effective understanding of application of rights of nature. Because this is our next challenge. It's great having laws, but if laws don't actually do anything, then we're in the same position as we are now. So I'd like to sort of basically say how important it is to share the idea. So thank you. And books this year, as we've seen with your book, as with Is a River Alive, it's had a major impact, I think, in trying to spread the word about these things. Very critical. So artists, writers, anthropologists, ecologists, lawyers, we all need to get together and understand each other. So there's one slide before that. Maybe I can control that. But that's fine. I'll start there. So, yeah, here we go. Okay, this is really important. So we've been working. One of the big challenges we had when we started Ecoforensic, and the reason we started Ecoforensic is I've been working for over 30 years now in Ecuador on conservation. How do we do effective community-based conservation to do stuff on the ground to protect species and so forth? And we had a very effective model we were working with. It's called para-ecology. It's like a paramedic for the biodiversity and climate crisis, the idea that the first responders to the crisis are living in these areas of high biodiversity, in the case of Ecuador, and also high threat. So these are the people who can actually do something on the ground. So the idea of parabiology is it's a word that's been used, it's been around before, but we've kind of honed it to work with communities to train them to collect ecological information, because it's what I do as a scientist. I can work with citizen science, to collect ecological information that could help management decisions, creating protected areas and so forth, and managing areas. And it was very successful. Then in 2016, mining concessions were laid all over Ecuador. And the reserve I first went to in 1995, Los Cedros, was threatened by mining. To his great credit, and may he rest in peace, Jose de Cou, who was the manager of the place, took a rights of nature case and won. We won it. I couldn't believe we won it under Ecuadorian constitutional law. So that was the inspiration, realizing how powerful ecological information was in that case, and the fact that nearly all the other areas, which we're talking about 16,000 square kilometers of protected areas, indigenous territories in Ecuador, have no or little data to protect themselves through the voice of ecology and science. So we needed to create an organization that could support communities to do that. We also needed to communicate the idea to funders and to people. So we needed to work with artists, and they've got this lovely artist we worked with called Sozapato. And you can see here, this is a description of sumac cauce, or nature. And this is what we are protecting. This is what our company, if you want to call it, or call NGO, its client is nature. And it's very important to understand what underpins that. A philosophy that comes out of this concept of sumac cauce, or good living, is buen vivir, is a concept called buen vivir. And I think that's really profound. I've recently been working with a sociologist. We're just about to publish a paper at the end of this month where we're looking at how sociology can help the topic. I mean, Jessica, you mentioned that, talking to other disciplines. So this has been a really interesting journey. And basically in sociology, there are a couple of concepts. The capitalist good life, buen vivir from capitalism, is basically built on unsustainable fossil fuel travel at the moment. It's built on nearly everything you do to live is degrading our environment. It means we've got this slow death. It's a concept called slow death, that there's a gradual erosion of our daily life, and we live in it. And we live with that sort of contradiction that everything I do, potentially to heat my house, to drive my car, is contributing to the death, but it's all I've got as an option to prove, my state in society, my role in society. So the capitalist good life also has another problem, cruel optimism. Anything like recycling, it may do a tiny fraction of a difference, but fundamentally doesn't change the system. That's an extractivist system that's been exported globally through colonialism. It doesn't address it. So there's no real way out, it seems. Buen vivir and the philosophy of rights of nature, that underpin rights of nature, sumac cauce, they have harmony as a concept between people, between communities, and between those and nature. And it changes fundamentally what you should do. So I just want to kind of leave this image on a practical challenge. I asked one of the communities we work with, one of the leaders called Carlos Zorilla, he's been fighting mining for over 30 years. And I said, well, look, there's an argument we need metals for transition away from fossil fuels to sustainable electrification. So we need the copper. And his response was really insightful and fundamental. He basically said that, okay, we do need to do that, but not everyone should have a private car. What you do is you invest the critical metals from the earth to public transport. If you've got any metals left over before destroying all the critical ecosystems, then have a few cars. So, it makes you think that the problem is back here where I live, in my culture here, where London was the big investment market and so forth. It brings the issue all the way back to us, although we fight it on the extractive frontier in Ecuador. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide, because what was wonderful about Ecuador, and I'm very much in love with that country, if you don't believe in nation state or the mixture of people and plurination. But they actually put a constitutional rights of nature set of laws in 2008. The one problem we have is that these are beautifully written laws. And I think Ecuador, I'd say, is one of the better thought through ones, because it's a universal declaration. It applies to anything. It's not specific for personhood for one river at a time. It's like everything. But what's really challenging, and this is the challenge we've taken on since we won the case of Los Cedros, is how do you translate things like nature has the right to maintain and regenerate life cycles, structure, functions, and evolutionary processes? Those are ecological terms. In ecology, there's a lot of information about how to measure them and how to predict the impacts to those things. So, but the work needs to be done. So fundamentally, I think I just want to say I'm calling for a new discipline at university level and to train at community level called ecological forensics, which is basically the academic support to understand and provide tools and methods for this. This is what we've been working on. But it's also worth saying that not all of this is ecology. There's probably 3 of those points there are ecological. Many of them are like sociological. So we're also calling for a socio-ecological forensics toolkit as approach as well, where we try and understand the societal changes that it implies as well. So that's really where we make the change. I'll just go to the last slide, and I'll try and wrap myself up. So what we've been doing, we've been very lucky in the last 3 years since the Los Cedros case, really, a few more years than that, 1 more year than that, is we had a small funding to use 3 pilot projects from 3 different ecosystems: Paramo, high altitude; cloud forest, which you can see a picture of here, and the Amazon rainforest system on the south, all affected by mining. So it's an experiment in saying, what do these ecosystems voices sound like with ecology? So what are the ecological tools you need to do to represent these in court? And so we're working with 3 communities, and they are different as well, from indigenous communities to traditional agriculturalists, and training para-ecologists to collect data. And we've already contributed to 1 case of stopping the mining from Codelco, the Chilean mining company, in 2023 in Lurimagua. This is a picture of that sort of ecosystem. That's where we're doing the training course, though. So we train communities in these training courses, and then we work with them for a year to set up a monitoring program to collect the data that they can use to represent nature in court. And that's the opportunity we have in Ecuador, where the constitution kind of demands it. But we're also asking the environmental impact assessment processes in Ecuador don't consider rights of nature. If rights of nature are in the constitution, it's the law of the laws. Everything below that has to listen to the constitutional requirements. So we're also arguing with the EIA itself. Environmental impact assessment has to be revised, has to incorporate new techniques, new tools to represent the voice of nature. So I think we've got an opportunity to create fundamental change, and it will make us rethink where we can actually do industrial extractivism, in my opinion. So there's a short film. You're welcome to watch it. There's links there. We can share that. We've got 3 films from each of the community, 5 minutes, to show the para-ecologists in practice. You can watch them in your own time, feel free. It's called Voices of the Para-Ecologists. But I just want to say, we've been lucky. We've got a few more years of funding now. We're looking at other ecosystems as well over the next 3 years, including setting up a research and scientific station with one of our communities in the Amazon for the Shuar to work and continue this exploration of ecological forensics and cultural forensics as well. So first of all, thanks, Jessica, for the invite to be on this panel and to have a little moment to talk about some of the projects we've been involved in. And I'm so happy that your book's out, because it's just spreading an amazing word of hope, I think. And that's the reality in the face of this ongoing extractivism and system that we are actually currently struggling. I'll call it a day there.
Thank you so much, Mika. It's been really nice to hear some more about your work. I have prepared some questions for everyone. I don't think we have time to go through all of them, but I hope to open the space, and maybe after the public can also ask questions if they wish. So first, one question for Jessica. You described rights of nature as both a legal and cultural innovation. Where in the stories you document do you see storytelling most clearly shifting legal or political outcomes?
Well, first of all, let me thank Janny and Mika for sharing their stories. I think, you can really feel the urgency, I think, behind their initiatives. And I believe that this is what needs to come out, rather than, just focusing on the legal background of different laws. So I think the example of Spain is a good one in terms of the power of short storytelling. So I think the moment, well, it also told me something unfortunate, which is that sometimes societies need disasters before they spring into action. And I think Mar Menor in Spain demonstrated that. But it also showed us that when people set an example, and I think the initiators of the Mar Menor law lived close by the lake and started saying in the media as well, I am the Mar Menor. It hurts me. It hurts the economy because house prices are dropping. It hurts each and every aspect of the economy and nature, and it's all related. And I think that is what mobilized people. So I would definitely, I think it's really relevant to learn the skill of storytelling, and you can do so via different platforms. Um, and I think to sort of wrap this up, it's also really important to join spaces like GARN. Josefina just shared it in the chat for all those listening, because I think, just speaking for myself, I learn most by listening to people like Mika and Janny, and all the people involved, and we can help each other with getting the message across, with spreading the word. And even I think Mika has a great demonstration of how you can be based in one country and have an impact in another country. So this is how I think everyone can contribute to the rights of nature movement. And I hope I, have done my little bit of doing so with this book. Thank you.
I think you can be certain of that. Thanks so much. Question for Janny. So Jessica's book discusses monoculture forestry and fire as systemic ecological violence. How do you think the rights of nature can help articulate harms that conventional environmental law fails to capture?
Te escuché la mitad, se me fue el internet. ¿Puedes repetirla, por favor?
How do you think the rights of nature can help articulate harms that conventional environmental law fails to capture?
Ok. Bueno, nosotros hemos hecho
We've made many attempts as a country to make constitutional changes. Probably many of those tries were known by the international community, these attempts. The last one helped us to ensure in the Constitution the explicit recognition of the rights of nature. Nevertheless, the situation wasn't favorable to what different organizations had stated, civil society, etc. And evidently, this left us again in square one, trying to open other specific areas in terms of legislation in order to install new regulations that would allow to see how the advances of extractivism were being dealt with in the territory and the different levels of devastations to nature and the environment. Nowadays, we have a very complex scenario, very complex political scenario, where it has been said explicitly about what the vision is in terms of the damage that could be made more than what has happened during this time. So nowadays, even though we believe that it might be true that we have to look for new advocacies, how to generate and how to achieve decision making processes that favor communities and territories, nevertheless, this is not enough. Because the advancement of this model is going deeper and deeper. While we're trying to fight in order to be able to have some sort of regulation that protects nature, a plan, a strategy, a development plan at a regional level appears at a national level that breaks with all of what we've been doing. and it multiplies it by 0, the work that we've been doing. So the level of advancement is very weak in terms of how this extractivist model is being looked at. That's what I was saying, that evidently we have to look at who are the players in the organizations that are looking for political advocacy in order to protect. And then there are others who are in the sphere that are dealing more with environmental education, advocacy. So here we have to have a strong intervention, hard work that will allow people to empower themselves and raise their voices in a stronger way to protect what is being destroyed with the current extractivist model. I believe that the advances are scarce, but we have to do it. We know that we have to fight this battle, but obviously in a model that is very adverse in order to be able to advance in the context that we're facing, because it seems that all the treaties, all of the investments of companies go along the lines of keep destroying, keep taking advantage of nature as a resource, as a commodity, and that is not changing. We see that each government to government, keep establishing or opening new possibilities for big investors, and communities are completely invisible in order to be able to protect Mother Earth because they protect life itself. That's all.
Leads me to the question of like, how can we employ rights of nature in such a way to enforce systemic change in extractive economies? Because I see that like within the current capitalist economic system, sometimes the ecological effectiveness of the rights of nature gets stunted. Like also in Ecuador, there are even constitutional rights, but the state is still continuing with mining expansions. So this is maybe a question everybody can reflect on, like how would the rights of nature look like beyond law, like in economics? And also maybe for Mika, how did Ecoforensic manage to revoke mining licenses?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think I mentioned earlier, I feel we're on the trenches at the moment at the extractive frontier with our community partners in Ecuador who are being threatened by what is actually something that emerges from the global system of capitalism. And it's rooted very much where I live in the UK. London's a stock market, Canadian stock markets, and so forth. And then it's also rooted in what we as people have for our pension investments and our, things. So the thing is convoluted. And it will be a challenge to address that because of the vested interest associated. But having said that, every time I come back from Ecuador, I have huge joy and hope by seeing some of the victories. I mean, just last week, at least, decisions are being changed. For example, a road had to be adjusted and moved because of a critically endangered species, toad, Hambato toad in Ecuador. So when you can get this sort of law into your system, locally, nationally, constitutionally, ideally, it slowly percolates through and it will cause it has to cause systemic change because, as I said, it fundamentally addresses the capitalist problem. You cannot keep extracting they're not resources. We're no longer surrounded by resources, we're surrounded by beings. And that is the click that has to happen. I do see it's a 200-year fight, maybe, but and I hope we have enough time that we don't, really manage to screw up our planet to the point where many fellow beings disappear in that time. But I do think, this is right where we are. This is our point of hope, and I think we have a huge responsibility to share these ideas, to hone them, to make them practical as we go forward. So I don't know the answer to your question, except keep on fighting. What I think is the really main glimmer of hope we have as an idea for transition on every level. In practice, just saying our communities do it by collecting scientific information that's listened to in courts. It's because their traditional knowledge often isn't. So we're playing a game of power. I mean, that's another discussion maybe, but basically we're playing the game of using the same information, scientific information, which is valid, and fighting it with that. That's just one route, isn't it?
Thank you so much. It all sounds very inspirational and hopeful. I don't know if there are any questions from the audience. Please speak up.
As we were waiting, I suppose, want to say, Janny, sorry to hear what's happening in Chile at the moment. So just my heart goes out to you.
Muchas gracias. Yo quería decir algo más.
Thank you. I wanted to say something else. What Mika said. A little while ago, we have been developing certain research in different regions of our country, visibilizing the experiences for environmental care. And we've been surprised to find that we've generated a huge database where there are the organizations and the communities that are stewards and that protect Mother Earth. And to the surprise of the academic world, this database is a very ample database that shows that it is an indicator that even though there might be this model that is so destructive that keeps destroying deeply our territories, but at the same time, in parallel, there are more experiences of people taking care of nature that are having this awareness because they feel it. They're incorporating this vision of feeling Mother Earth as part of us, or that we're part of it, right? So there also exists at a level of our countries and at a Latin American level, multiple networks that are being or getting articulated in order to take care of seeds, of food sovereignty, of different eco villages, and that are changing this vision and that incorporate this new paradigm, which is buen vivir or suma causa. And then there are emblematic cases such as Colombia, of people who are in Ecuador, in Brazil, in Peru, who are involved in all these processes of taking care of Mother Earth. And I believe that we have to show that we are advancing in this sense, and we are generating experiences that are modifying this system. Not as visibly because we've been very cautious in trying to take care of our experiences so that they don't attack us, but also making it grow more. And this is happening, and this is a source of inspiration and hopefulness for movements that are involved in environmental issues, but also cultural matters, social aspects. So that's what I wanted to share. If there are no further questions, we might be able to close this session. We might, if it's possible to take a picture, please open your camera. Everybody, smile.
Tenemos
Thank you
una
so much.
pregunta en el chat. We have a question in the Q&A chat.
Let's see. I'm doing my master thesis on the implementation of rights of nature in a reserve in South Africa. No indigenous people are present there, nor is it a political battle through which the rights of nature is implemented. As I am researching more about the rights of nature in the endeavor to do research on how the reserve can best implement the philosophy of rights of nature in their internal functioning, I notice that it stands in contrast to how the Black Christian community might relate to nature in that place. These are assumptions and is a binary idea of the context. However, what my question is how to navigate the implementation of rights of nature in a context without reproducing colonial patterns. Does somebody feel called to answer this question?
Well, I think this example goes to show that it is really difficult, and in a cultural context, that the rights of nature have to be respected. One example I can give from myself is that I thought that Tamaka Borough, a small place in the US, was the first to have implemented the rights of nature in their local laws. And after, via the Earth Law Center, I found out that there were peoples who had already enshrined the rights of nature in their own legal system or cultural system. So I think we have to be very aware of our own background and be sensitive when it comes to these issues. And without knowing this specific example from South Africa that you are researching, I would highly recommend you to speak to the people there that are behind the initiative, people in the region surrounding this particular area, and get their views. I think that's where we have to start, all of us, speaking to the people on the ground. But I think maybe we could close off with an invitation, that I think Mika, Janny, myself, we're all in the chat with our Instagram handles. So is the GARN Hub. So if there's any questions after the session, please feel free to reach out to all of us, and we can see if we can help.
I think just to follow up on that, I think one of the key things we do is this is all about co-creation of ideas. You don't go in with an idea and a concept and impose it. That's the colonial model. So what we've found, good anthropological immersion or informed hanging out is one of the first steps to do anywhere. And I'm just thinking of South Africa, and there's lots of the roots of the ideas come with Cormac, for example's book. I mean, there are a lot of people you can tap onto there in South Africa first to talk to, but also the idea of Ubuntu. There's lots of philosophies that have been sit underneath as well, historically underneath Christianity there as well, that can be tapped into, which is very similar to Sumak Kause. It's also Christianity isn't a barrier, and if you look at the recent Pope's declaration of respect for life and rights of nature, so it's really about having those conversations about how people relate to their world, and doesn't mean, but it does can become challenging. I agree. You just have to be very, you have to listen a little bit first, I think.
Okay, if there's no more any questions, I want to thank all of the panelists, speakers, and organization for this wonderful webinar. It's been a real treat to hear everyone share about the global movement and how this articulates on the ground in local initiatives. And I really wish you all the best with continuing this work, and I hope we can connect again in the future. Thank you so much.